very interesting to me. Brings up the whole issue of executive orders. Of course, President Obama, that was a big campaign pledge. He wasn't going to do executive orders. They all say that, and then, you know, it's one order after another. They build on all the previous executive orders. They never peel these back. I liked your idea about not passing a law unless someone had proposed two to take away back in the day.
And I'm still intending to do that. In fact, one of the very first things we're going to do is we're going to look at every single regulation in the state of Maine. Governor Wells did it in Massachusetts. Took 1,600 laws, 20,000 pages of regulations, and cut in 50% within the first year. We are going to look at regulations that assist Maine people, that are good for Maine people, good for Maine business, and if they're antiquated, and if they're not effective, or if they're adversarial to the private sector, we're going to get rid of them. And I will tell you, if they're going to get my signature, they're going to have to be willing to tell me and be willing to show me that the laws that we're passing are not going to cost us jobs, or they're not going to cost us development of new business.
So is it possible that at the end of a LePage governorship we would have less laws on the books than we do now?
That is certainly my intent. And I say my intent because this is important. It's one thing to have a governor in the Blaine House, and who has the bully pulpit, who has the ability and the desire to make things better. But it's also very important that the Maine people understand, if you keep sending the same people that got us all these regulations and put the shackles of economic slavery on Maine people, if you continue down that path and you leave the governor alone, it will slow him down tremendously. While we've had great success in Waterville with an all Democratic council, it's a council that's not way far liberal left. There's some conservatives, there's some people that want to improve the city. In Augusta right now, the leadership in Augusta is all about power and control, power and control. If you send the same people back to Augusta, expect a lot of the same results. So, my recommendation is look very, very hard at like-minded people. If you're interested in lowering the regulations, interested in better jobs, then you need to select candidates this fall that have the same mindset.
So going back to the executive orders, would you be willing to look back at the executive orders passed by previous governors, and if there are some that aren't constitutional or aren't appropriate, get rid of them?
Absolutely. I can assure you right now, one of them is going. I've got the target on that one. The one on sanctuary is gone. The other thing that I'm going to try to do and hope to do and believe that the legislature is smart enough to recognize is we're the only state, or one of the few states in the country, that provides welfare to convicted felons and illegal immigrants. We need to make them legal, first of all, and if they can't be made legal, they need to go away, back to their country, and convicted felons are convicted felons. I don't think once they're incarcerated and they serve their time and they come out, I don't think they should remain on the dole.
So what's happening now? They come out and they have assistance until they get on their feet or something like that?
And some never get on their
right.
feet.
Of course.
Because if you've been incarcerated, yeah, it's exactly. If you've been incarcerated for multiple years, you come out and they pay you to come out. It's an easy ride at the expense of other people. And particularly in Maine, why it's so important is 80%. 80% is a very, very crucial number in Maine, because that's what Maine people make on a per capita income for the rest of the nation. We need to bring that 80% to 100 to 110% of the national per capita income, and then Maine people can sit back, pay their taxes, and be very happy and live their lives without government intrusion.
I recently saw something on the GOP legislature with Rich Sieber and Doug Thomas talking about how It looked like for Somerset County, the average state worker in Maine was making about twice as much on average than the private sector worker. How do we bring those together?
Well, what we gotta do is really need to take a very, very hard look at state workers. We need to, what can be done in the private sector, we ought to take a hard look at and get it to the private sector so we can get the private sector working. Secondly, it used to be in Maine that the salaries, the wages that were paid to state employers were far less than the private sector. But the benefits were always superior, so people would work in state government, retire with a reasonable pension. Well, right now, they make more than the private sector for base salary. The benefits are very rich, to the point where we have a $4.4 billion deficit, and it's facing bankruptcy. The state is in $1 billion deficit on the operating side, so the big unions have taken control of the state at the expense of the taxpayers, who are working paycheck to paycheck, and they're significantly below the national average in earned income.
Last big thing that I got to tell you, I do, like I said, a lot of my shows on request. By far the most popular request I've ever had is another interview with Paul LePage.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, it's be a crowd pleaser. The other thing that a lot of people are interested, of course, the Second Amendment. In Maine, people are that's always a big issue. But do you favor any changes to our current gun laws?
The only changes that I see necessary for the gun laws in Maine is to remove them. I believe that we should honor the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Maine, and we should have no controls other than controls on convicted felons. I believe we should take guns away from convicted felons, but an everyday, honest, hardworking citizen should have the right to own and bear arms, period. It should not be tampered with.
So no background checks for, well, I guess you would have to do a background check to find if you're a convicted felon, but registration?
I'm against registration. I think you should own a gun. I don't think that registering your gun, doing a background check is vital to find your convicted felons. But quite frankly, gun controls have not stopped the murders in this country, have not slowed or stopped assaults with guns. The problem is this: everybody blames the gun manufacturers. Everybody blames everybody but what's really happening. What's really happening is those without guns, or those that are controls and live by the laws, become vulnerable to those who don't live by the law. It's that simple. In Switzerland, the head of household is required to own a gun. There's a city in Georgia that implemented a similar law, and 50% of the crime went out the door immediately. I'm not suggesting that we put a law in that says you have to own a gun, but what I'm saying is every law-abiding citizen has the right and the duty to protect his family and protect his assets.
So when you saw, I don't know if you saw it, but last week the North Carolina governor declared an emergency over the weather, and you see all these emergencies being declared now, but part of the impact of that would be if you were outside of your home with a gun, it was illegal. Can you foresee as governor any reason to ever take away people's Second Amendment rights during an emergency?
No. I just can't envision it. During an emergency, during these hurricanes or storms, or 9/11, for instance, when 9/11 occurred, looting became a major problem. Well, I believe that the owners of those establishments and those businesses and those homes have the right to protect themselves, and they certainly have the responsibility and duty to protect their family. So I think the governor of North Carolina was absolutely wrong.
Glad to hear that. Anything else you'd like to share? Any other issues that you feel are getting out there that you'd like to put out there?
I will tell you this. In closing, I would simply say, I'm running for governor as a public servant. I'm not interested in power and control as my opponents are. What I want to do is bring back the Constitution. I believe in a representative republic. I believe that the bosses and the stakeholders are the residents and the citizens of Maine, and they are elected representative to work for them, not to control them.
Thank you very much, and good luck the rest
My
of the way,
pleasure.
sir.
Thank you.